She cried for her puppy. What I found next broke me. I still hear that sound. It wasn't a bark. It was a long, strangled ululation that tore through the cold, rain-slick air of Bayfield like a blade. A sound that didn't call for help so much as announced a kind of grief. The grief of a soul watching the world steal away the only thing it loved.
It's okay.
I pulled the car to the shoulder of the coastal road, where streetlights smeared water across the windshield, and the sound kept stretching out raw and relentless, splitting open into something that might as well have been a mother's cry.
You're safe with me. We're gonna get you out of this rain.
It made my chest clamp shut. It was raining, fine and hard, the wind whipping stabs of cold against my face. And there she was, a drenched Doberman shivering on a strip of scrub between rusted trash and twisted metal. Her neck a map of veins, her legs folding under her. And then she lifted her head and ululated again, raw, hoarse, utterly desperate. People walked past under umbrellas, some glanced once and hurried on with bowed heads as if they'd seen nothing, as if the world had already decided not to notice. No one stopped. I opened the car door. The rain cut into me like ice. I named her Luna later, but at that moment she stood about 5 meters off, letting out a sharp, cautious bark, and then that long, rending ululation again, a sound that tightened something in my chest, not out of fear, but because I knew it. I had heard it the night my wife died in the empty hospital room when all I could do was sit and cry. The sound needed no translation. It was the sound of loss. It was the sound of love that could not be saved. I shone my flashlight toward where the mother had been staring. Oh God. Beneath a stack of rusting barrels there was a puppy, a tiny Doberman, no more than a month old, curled and filthy, and barely breathing, its neck trapped in a white plastic ring dug in so deep the skin around it was dark and bleeding. Every twitch made the ring cut deeper, and its breath had become a dry, thin rasp, like a violin string about to snap. I folded myself down into the mud. My hand met the plastic, and it was cold and thick, encrusted with blood and muck. I tried to twist it, and it didn't budge, and the pup let out a small whimpering sound and went quiet, leaving only that shallow, wheezy inhale. I looked up. There was no one, no toolbox, no cardboard box with a knife, nothing. I called the rescue line, and the phone said the queue was full, that they couldn't get here in time. My heart stopped. Every intake of that little body felt like a countdown. I wrapped my jacket around the pup. It was so small and light that it felt like a wet handful of ash, and I whispered, "Come on, don't give up," not sure whether I was talking to it or to myself. Luna let out a short, sharp bark, a jab right to the center of me, and I stood cradling the puppy and ran for the car as the rain poured like the sky itself was grieving. Its breath hammered against my palm, fast horse fighting for each second. I pressed my hand to its chest. The heart was beating, but arrhythmic and thin, each beat like a small landmine threatening to go still under my fingers, and in the rear view, Luna was racing after us, a black blot in the rain, her ululation trailing into the night like an accusation and a plea all at once. I put my foot down. I didn't know where I was going, only that stopping would kill it. I kept telling myself, no one's coming. It's just you, Jack. Do something. Water splashed from the wheels and cold sliced through the cracked window. On the seat, the pup whimpered, the ring still cutting into its neck and the skin weeping blood. I tore off my second jacket and patted it around its throat to ease the pressure, and time stretched into a slow grinding thing where every minute felt like an entire life. A flash of lightning lit my face, and I saw that I was crying not from fear of losing the animal, but because for the first time in years my heart ached for someone other than myself. I gripped the wheel hard and stared down the road. Through the rain, the clinic sign blinked into view, Bayfield Veterinary Clinic. I exhaled and held to one single thought that felt like a prayer. Please, God, let it live. I live alone on the edge of Bayfield in a small wooden house 1/2 mile from the bay. In the mornings, the sea mist slips through the window and leaves a thin crust of salt on the table. At night, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks is the only voice that still speaks to me. It's been 5 years since I lost Laura. The house still carries the faint scent of the soap she used, and sometimes, I swear, I can hear her footsteps drifting through the hallway soft as smoke. After the funeral, I stopped taking woodworking jobs. Stopped working, stopped talking, stopped caring about the world outside. In a small town like this, silence is something people learn to live with. No one asks too many questions. No one wants to reopen what already hurts. I thought I had learned how to live with loss until that rainy night. When I heard the mother Doberman's cry through the wind, something inside me woke up. It wasn't compassion. It wasn't a duty. It was instinct, one broken heart recognizing the sound of another. After bringing the puppy to the clinic, I sat in the hallway under white fluorescent light. Luna, the mother, was soaked and trembling, curled up by my boots. Drops of water slid from her fur and pooled on the tiles. I didn't shoo her away. I didn't speak. We just sat there listening to the rain tap the metal roof like a slow clock, counting another fragile life in the room ahead. On the wall were pictures of rescued animals. At the far end of the hallway hung a wooden plaque that read, "Because every breath matters." I stared at it for a long time, feeling as if someone had quietly reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That breath, no matter how faint, is still worth saving. A nurse passed by and asked softly, "You're the one who found them." I nodded. She gave me a tired smile. "We'll do our best." Then the door to the operating room closed. I looked at Luna. Her eyes never left that door. Each clink of metal made her flinch. I reached out and touched her head. At first, she pulled away. Then, as if she understood we were waiting for the same thing, she rested her head on my knee and sighed. That warmth, after years of emptiness, felt like a rope pulling me back to the surface. When Laura was alive, she used to say, "I believe people should stop when they see someone hurting, even if they don't know what to do." I didn't stop because I was kind. I stopped because I remembered her words. Later that night, when the nurse came out and said the surgery was still going, I stepped outside for a cigarette. The wind off the bay was so cold that my hands went numb. Out on the dark horizon, the sails were barely visible, black shapes drifting under a sky the color of ash. Luna followed me, sat beside me silent. I muttered she loved the ocean too. Every time it rained, she said the sea was breathing. I gave a small brittle laugh, foreign even to my own ears. Dogs don't understand words, but Luna lifted her head and looked at me as if she understood everything. It wasn't pity, just presence. Around midnight, the nurse opened the door. Her voice was hoarse. "You should come in." My chest tightened. I was terrified of hearing too late, but it wasn't. The next morning, the bay was wrapped in a thick white mist. I went back to the clinic. The glass door was fogged, and behind it a warm yellow light spilled softly through the drizzle, a thin band of life cutting through the cold world outside. Dr. Collins, the young veterinarian, met me with tired but kind eyes. "He's still breathing," she said, "but very weak. His throat's badly damaged. He's dehydrated, and oxygen levels are low. We're monitoring his heart and lungs." I nodded. Words wouldn't come. I just stood there staring through the glass. Rusty lay still on the stainless steel table, his head wrapped in white gauze, his breathing slow but steady. Each rise and fall of his chest made me lighter for a moment, then afraid again right after. Luna stood beside me, her gaze fixed on her pup. The nurse touched my shoulder gently. "You can go closer, but don't touch his neck." I took a few slow steps, the beeping of the monitor syncing with my own heartbeat, the rhythm of a fragile life hovering between staying and leaving. I placed my hand on the edge of the table. Luna lifted her head and gave a soft whine. Her eyes met mine, gratitude, fear, apology, all at once, as if she was saying she was sorry she couldn't protect her child. I whispered, "You did everything you could." I wasn't sure if I said it to her or to myself. Sometimes, two broken souls don't need language to understand each other. The rain outside had turned heavier. Wind slipped through the cracks and made the curtain tremble. Luna flinched, ears folding down. She looked toward the window, then back at her pup, barking softly, as if to say, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Rusty stirred a dry sound, scraping from his throat. It was so faint I thought I imagined it. Dr. Collins smiled. "Good, reflexes are returning." I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Sweat and rain blurred together on my face. The nurse brought me a small chair. I sat, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the table. That feeling. It was the same as the night I sat outside an ICU 5 years ago. The same steady beeping. The same paralyzing fear that all you can do is wait and pray. I remembered Laura's voice from her last days. "If you ever see someone struggling to breathe, help them breathe again. Don't just stand there." I didn't understand it then. Now I do. Rusty was barely the size of my hand, fur still damp, the smell of disinfectant mingling with his fragile breath. Luna let out a faint whine, eyes lighting up as he moved. My hand trembled. I reached out and touched her shoulder. She didn't pull away this time. She pressed her head against my leg, trembling as if to say, "Hold on to us. Don't leave." Dr. Collins said something about IV fluids, about eating again within 48 hours. I only half heard. My mind was caught on the image of that plastic ring, the thing that had nearly taken his life. It sat on a tray nearby, a cheap piece of white plastic edges stained with dried blood. I picked it up, turned it under the light. So small, so useless, so deadly. I clenched my fist, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of how easily the world had learned to see pain and simply walk past it. I looked at Luna again. Her eyes, never blinked, locked on her child. And I thought if a mother's love had a shape, it would look like this. Near dawn, Rusty moved again. His throat quivered. A thin sigh escaped. No more rasping, just real breath, weak but even. Dr. Collins let out a breath of her own. "He's past the worst of it." Luna lifted her head, licked the doctor's hand, then turned and licked her pup's face. A drop, rain, or tear, I couldn't tell, slid down my collar. All I knew was that in that moment the room seemed brighter, even though it was still raining outside. I stayed until the sun crept over the mountains. The first light pierced the window and glowed across the white bandage on Rusty's neck. I whispered, like a promise, "If you make it, kid, I won't ever let you be alone again." Luna looked at me, eyes dark and wet, and in that silence we made a pact without ever needing a single word. That night I didn't go home. Outside, the rain kept drumming against the roof like a heartbeat pounding in the chest of the sky. Inside the small room, bathed in amber light, I sat beside Rusty, a puppy. No bigger than my hand, white bandages wrapped around his neck, an IV line thin as fishing thread running down his leg. Dr. Collins stood nearby, eyes locked on the monitor. Rusty's heartbeat flickered, wavering between life and the void. Her voice was low, his breathings still weak. If he makes it through the night, his chances double. I nodded, unable to trust words, my eyes fixed on the small chest that rose and fell fragile as a moth's wing. Luna lay beneath the table, her head resting on her paws, eyes wide and unblinking. The entire room seemed to hold its breath with him. Time didn't move there. Only the pulse of light on steel, the whine of the wind through the cracks, the smell of disinfectant rain and metal tangled in the air. Each soft beep from the machine felt like a heartbeat for hope. I remembered Laura's hand the night she lay in her hospital bed. Her grip was weak but warm. She said, "When someone's drowning for air, all they need is someone else's breath to believe they haven't been left behind." I understood that now, because in that cold light watching Rusty fight for breath, I realized I was breathing again with him. Dr. Collins murmured, "The tissue around the neck is necrotic. We'll clean it one last time." Collins' smiled voice trembling. He did it. Tears blurred my vision. Luna let out a long, low howl, but this time it wasn't despair. It was released. She rushed forward, licking her pup's face, her small broken sounds spilling out like thank yous to the universe. I stood, frozen hands, shaking, heart pounding. No one spoke. We just watched. And in that suspended moment, everything else disappeared. There was only breath and light and life. Rusty was still weak, but his eyes cracked open. That tiny gaze drifted toward me, lingered, as if trying to recognize the man who pulled him back from the edge. I whispered, "Welcome back, kid." He couldn't hear me, but I said it anyway. Because sometimes words aren't meant for the ears, they're meant for the heart. Dr. Collins scribbled notes and said softly, "We'll monitor his oxygen for a few more hours. If he stabilizes the mask and come off by morning." I nodded, but never took my eyes off the pup. I touched the metal table where the light reflected in thin ripples. The steel was cold, but his warmth was spreading into the air. I found myself whispering, "You're breathing again. Now it's my turn." Luna stayed close-tailed, gently moving, eyes still on her pup. I rested my hand on her back, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because of a miracle, but because I had just witnessed one. One that needed no spotlight, no music, only the faint stubborn breath of a soul the world had chosen to forget. When I finally stepped outside, I turned back to the window. Rusty was asleep. Luna curled beside him, her muzzle resting against his nose. The rain still fell, but inside that room it had stopped. I stood under the awning, lifted my face to the drizzle, and for the first time in years I took a full, deep breath, cold, salty, and alive. 2 days after that night, the sky over Bayfield was crystal clear. The sea was calm, and the scent of salt drifted through the clinic window, blending with the sterile tang of antiseptic. Rusty still lay on the table, white bandages circling his neck. His breathing was steady now, light but even. I arrived early, carrying the denim jacket I'd wrapped him in that night. Dr. Collins smiled. "He's eaten a little," she said. "Just a few spoonfuls, but that's a good sign." I smiled back. "Sounds like a small miracle." She nodded. "Every miracle starts with a breath, doesn't it?" Luna sat nearby, eyes locked on every tiny movement her pup made. She hadn't left his side for a second. Every time Rusty twitched or whimpered, she leaned in and licked his nose as if to remind him, "I'm here." The sight caught something deep in my throat. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just quiet, unwavering love that somehow made the small room feel warm again. Dr. Collins explained that Rusty would need time to eat normally. The damage to his throat made swallowing difficult. I took a small plastic spoon, scooped a bit of soft food, and brought it near his mouth. At first, he turned away, frightened. Then Luna lowered her head, licked the spoon once, and gently licked her pup's cheek. Rusty looked at her, hesitated, then opened his mouth and swallowed a little. Just a little, but it made my heart explode. I chuckled softly. "Good job, little warrior." Dr. Collins smiled. "Maybe you should stay. He listens to you more than he does to me." I said, "Maybe, because I'm learning to breathe again, too." That evening, they let Luna and me stay through the night. The room glowed with dim yellow light waves murmured beyond the walls, and the monitor's rhythmic beeping filled the air. Rusty slept his breathing deep and steady, tiny but certain. I leaned against the wall. Luna lay beside me, her head resting on my leg. The lamplight shimmered on her damp black fur. I ran my hand along her back, feeling the warmth spread into my palm. For the first time in years, I felt peace inside silence. Not the hollow quiet I'd lived in since Laura died, but the kind filled with breath of life of love. I whispered, afraid to break the fragile calm, "Thank you for staying." Luna lifted her head, her eyes glinting under the light, then placed it gently on my hand and sighed. That was enough. I understood. On the third day, Rusty stood for the first time. His neck still sore, legs trembling, but he tried. Each step looked like a battle against gravity, yet he kept moving. Luna stood beside him, nudging him forward with gentle licks of encouragement. When he looked up at me, God, I had never seen eyes like that before. Not fearful, just filled with trust. I knelt down and whispered, "Good boy, you're doing so well." My voice shook, not because I was weak, but because for the first time in a long while I felt part of something truly alive. By late afternoon, the sunlight tilted through the window. Rusty was asleep again, white bandage glowing faintly under the golden light, his breathing as steady as my own heartbeat. Through the glass, I could see the ocean shimmering in a soft amber haze, the kind of light Laura used to call the light of forgiveness. Maybe she was right. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about daring to believe again in something small, like the breath of a life that was saved. That night, I stepped outside for a cigarette. Luna lay beside me. Rusty slept inside. The air was clear, no rain. The wind from the bay carried the scent of wet wood and salt. I looked up. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a pale patch of blue. And I realized something in me was breaking apart too, the heavy thing I'd carried for 5 long years. Maybe I hadn't just saved one life. Maybe they were saving what was left of mine. I went back in. Rusty stirred, gave a soft whimper. Luna looked up, then settled back down beside him, eyes closing. I switched off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the monitor. In that soft golden darkness, our breaths blended, slow, steady, calm. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the night, because tonight it carried the sound of life. On the 5th morning, after Rusty came home, the sky over Bayfield was impossibly clear. Sunlight poured through the window, brushing across the old wood and coating everything in a soft golden warmth. Luna lay stretched on the rug, Rusty curled against her, both of them asleep, as if the world had never known darkness. I stood in the kitchen making coffee. The smell of roasted beans mingled with the faint salt of the sea, the scent I used to dread, now somehow calming my heart. I thought about those nights in the clinic, about the rain, and the sound of machines breathing for him, and realized this house wasn't silent anymore. The silence now had a pulse, a rhythm, a heartbeat of its own. I turned back to the table and set my cup down. The lid snapped softly. Click. Just a tiny sound, but Rusty jerked upright, body trembling. His neck stiffened, eyes wide and panicked. In that instant, the image came rushing back, the rain, the plastic ring tightening, the gasping, the blood. Rusty backed into the wall, shaking violently. His breathing turned rapid, shallow, a dry, rasping whine scraping from his throat. Luna barked once sharp and low, then moved toward him, trying to press her head over his chest, but he flinched and rolled, hitting the table leg with a short, broken cry. Everything inside me froze. I dropped to my knees, hands open in front of me. "It's okay, Rusty. It's okay. Hear me. You're safe now." He didn't hear me. He just stared, those terrified eyes full of confusion and pain, as if I were the one who'd hurt him. My chest tightened. That old helplessness flooded back, the same helplessness I'd felt the night I sat beside Laura's bed and listened to her breathing fade away. You can't fix it. You can't touch it. You can't say anything to make the fear stop. Luna stepped forward. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She simply lay down between us, lowering her head, breathing slowly and steadily. The sound of a mother's breath. steady, anchored, peaceful. That sound pulled Rusty back thread by thread to the present. I followed her lead. I sat cross-legged on the floor opposite them, inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly. Once, twice. I didn't speak again. I just breathed. Rusty watched his ears, still folded body trembling in waves. But then he blinked. His breathing began to slow, sinking, hesitant at first, then softer, steadier with ours. Luna touched her nose to his neck and gave a quiet whimper. He pressed his head against her chest, then nestled in his breathing, evening out again. I let out the air I'd been holding. In that sound, 3 breaths tangled together, I heard something greater than survival. I heard trust returning, fragile but real. I picked up the plastic lid from the floor, turned it in my fingers. So small, so harmless, and yet enough to summon a nightmare. I walked out onto the porch and looked toward the ocean. The light shimmered across the surface like pieces of memory, broken and glittering. I didn't throw the lid away. I placed it on the windowsill beside Laura's photo, where she still smiled from within the old wooden frame. A piece of the past not erased but kept, a reminder that every scar can become a marker of courage. When I came back inside, Rusty was asleep again. Luna looked up at me, her gaze soft as wind. I sat beside them, brushed my hand gently over Rusty's neck and whispered, "Good job, kid. You faced it. Now keep living." The breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the sound of waves. It wasn't a howl. It wasn't a cry. It was breathing 3 rhythms merged into one. Mine, Luna's, Rusty's. And I knew in that quiet harmony we had just completed our own ritual of healing. A month later, the sea at Bayfield was calm again. Winter winds swept gently across the dunes, and the old wooden house no longer echoed with loneliness. Every morning, when sunlight filtered through the window, I could hear 3 breaths, mine, Luna's, and Rusty's. 3 souls once broken, now sharing one warmth. Rusty was growing fast. The wound on his neck had healed, leaving a faint crescent scar like a ring of fate finally closed. When the light touched it, it shimmered silver, reminding me that some scars are not meant to be hidden. They are proof of survival, of trust regained. Luna had grown stronger too, her stride proud, as if she knew she had reclaimed an entire world in her son's eyes. I watched them, playing in the yard, Luna sprinting ahead. Rusty, clumsy but determined, his half-flopped ears bouncing, his tail wagging wildly. Each of his steps seemed to erase a little more of the fear still lodged inside me. That afternoon, I stopped sawing wood and looked toward the porch. Rusty lay by the door, eyes half closed, breathing slowly, his neck shifting softly with each passing breeze. Luna was beside me, her head resting on my leg. The sky glowed a faint orange, the color Laura had always loved most. I whispered, "You see that, Laura? We're still breathing." I didn't know why I said it. Maybe because some part of me believed she could still hear. Or maybe because I needed to hear it myself to believe life can continue even when loss never really leaves. That night I sat on the porch again. The sea wind was cool but gentle. Rusty sat beside me, Luna's head resting on my knee. We watched the sunset glide across the water. No words, no music, just breath shared warm, real. In front of me on the windowsill still lay that small plastic lid I'd placed there weeks ago. I hadn't thrown it away. I'd tied it to a thin piece of twine and hung it beside Laura's photo on the wooden wall, the spot where morning light always touched first. A once meaningless piece of plastic now turned into a symbol of a new faith. Somehow, what once caused pain had become a reminder of courage. I realized that real healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means being able to look back without hurting anymore. The next morning, Rusty barked for the first time. No rasp, no break. A clean, strong bark, clear and bright. Luna lifted her head and barked back. I laughed, a sound bursting out like sunlight breaking through years of shadow. Rusty turned to me, tilting his head as if to ask, "Did I do it right?" I nodded, perfect kid. And in that moment, I understood the greatest gift of rescue isn't just a saved life, it's how it helps us rediscover the part of ourselves we thought was gone. I used to think I had saved Rusty, but the truth was, he had saved me the part of my heart that stopped believing in new beginnings after Laura left. That afternoon, as I walked Luna and Rusty along the beach, a boy on a bike stopped and asked, "Mister, why does his neck have a scar?" I smiled, because once someone left him behind. But he didn't give up. The boy nodded, smiling back. I watched Rusty run ahead, sunlight spilling across his back tail, sweeping through the air like a flag of triumph. And in that moment, I knew the pain of the past had transformed into something beautiful. A beginning, a breath renewed, a reason to stay. Because sometimes when we save a life, it's that life that saves the quiet dying part of us. There are moments in life when words become useless, when all we can do is reach out, hold on, and keep breathing together. Rusty taught me that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing to stay even when it hurts. Because every breath, every heartbeat, every second chance means more than we realize. If this story touched you, please don't let it end here. Share it so that someone out there will know that kindness still exists, that even the smallest act of compassion can change the course of a life. Subscribe, ring the bell, and walk with us down Rescue Road. Be the voice for those who cannot speak. Be their hope. Because somewhere out there in the rain tonight, a trembling soul is still waiting for someone brave enough to stop and whisper, "It's okay. You're safe now." Kindness, faith, second chances. That's how the world keeps breathing.